My name is Olivia. I'm 35 and have been married to my husband Lucas for 7 years. We have a 5-year-old son, Thomas. Normally, it's just the three of us living a peaceful life, but I have one major grievance. It's the long vacations and Christmas when we go to Lucas's parents' house. Only his parents live there, but during the holidays, his sister and her family join us too. During these gatherings, which sometimes exceed 10 people, I'm expected to handle all the meal preparations. Because I'm married to the eldest son, everyone seems to think it's my duty. His sisters don't help me at all. On top of that, they leave their kids with me and go out to have fun. Even Lucas doesn't offer me any help, so as the holidays approach, I start to dread them. Just the thought of preparing meals at my in-laws is painful, not to mention the harassment I endure from Lucas's mother, Ava. From the beginning of our marriage, Ava has criticized everything I do. The first time we went to visit after getting married, she told me out of the blue, "Olivia, please prepare all the meals while you're here." I was shocked. It was my first time in their kitchen, and everything was thrown at me. In a panic, I checked the fridge, finding almost nothing. I had to start by shopping for groceries. "Do you want anything specific to eat?" I asked with a smile without showing my irritation. "Just make something delicious. Don't check with us every time, just get on with the cooking." Jackson, Lucas's father, seemed nice and calm, but I couldn't figure out what he really thought. Ava was always openly hostile towards me. Even when I casually asked Lucas about his parents' favorite dishes, "Anything's fine, don't worry too much about it," he always responds so casually. Lucas is originally unreliable, but since then, my distrust in him has only grown. In the end, I decided to make a safe choice and cook curry. As the smell of curry began to waft from the kitchen, Ava started her snide remarks. "Curry gives me heartburn. I'll have to take some antacid tonight." Without time to make anything else, I served the curry for dinner. Ava complained that the curry was too spicy, or that she preferred pork over beef. "Anyone can make a decent curry," she remarked, leaving the comment hanging in the air, yet she went for seconds. Meanwhile, Jackson ate without saying a word, but after he finished, he let out a deep sigh and left the room. While Ava's reactions are irritating, Jackson's sigh feels more condemning than her snide remarks. Dealing with just my in-laws' meals is stressful enough, but it gets even worse when Lucas's sisters and their families join. Harper's family consists of Lucas's sister Harper, her husband Ethan, and their daughter. Harper, in her appearance and manner of speaking, is frighteningly similar to Ava. Together, they hurl insults at me, making it feel like there are two Avas. When Harper comes to visit, she expects me to handle everything from cooking to making beds. Of course, she doesn't thank me, she takes it for granted. Ethan, usually quiet around his in-laws and Harper, becomes tyrannical when they're not around. "Go buy cigarettes," he'd demand, treating me more like a housemaid than family. Their daughter Emma, much like Harper, seems spiteful. "Olivia, we're out of juice." Then Ethan would join in, ordering, "Olivia, I'm out of beer. Bring some." Laughing foolishly, the two of them enjoy themselves. They are usually quiet in front of Harper, probably because they're used to being scolded by her. They seem to let loose when at the in-laws. For me, who ends up doing all the work, it's unbearable. Natalie's family includes Lucas's sister Natalie, her husband Mason, and their son. Compared to the insidious Ava and Harper, Natalie is brighter and easier to talk to. She always comes to chat while I'm preparing meals. While it's nice to be approached so casually, Natalie doesn't help at all. At first, I used to listen to her seriously, but if she's not going to help, she's just in the way. Eventually, when I responded non-committally to her chatter, "Are you even listening to me?" she'd snap. Busy with work, I had to listen to Natalie's endless, meaningless stories about her husband's complaints or her in-laws' snide remarks. I wanted to vent to Natalie too, but I couldn't dare speak ill of the in-laws. As soon as Natalie realizes I'm not fully engaged, she'd tattle to Ava and Harper. Then I'd get scolded by both Ava and Harper. "Just because she's your sister-in-law doesn't mean you can ignore her. You should at least listen to her. Such a mean spirit, bullying your weaker sister." They'd freely insult me. I wanted to retort, "Who's the mean one here?" But I didn't have the courage. All I could do was endure the long vacations and Christmases. Even when I was pregnant, the treatment didn't change. "I worked as usual the day after I gave birth," Ava would brag, expecting the same from me. I heard from Lucas that Ava had been badly harassed by her mother-in-law too. It seems she's intent on making me experience the same misery. I wish she would stop returning the ill treatment she received onto her daughter-in-law. Thomas was born in December, so that year, we didn't go to the in-laws for Christmas. Why don't you go home alone? I suggested to Lucas. He replied grumpily. It's boring to go back by myself, so let's skip it this year. He informed me that year, the siblings didn't stay at the in-laws for Christmas as usual. They left immediately. Without me there, nobody could handle the meal preparations, so no one stayed overnight. But from the next vacation onwards, the hellish treatment at the in-laws returned. Now, I had to take care of Thomas while preparing meals and accommodations. When Thomas dirtied his clothes and I had to do laundry at the in-laws, since we're letting you use the washing machine, do our laundry as well. They started making me wash their laundry too. Seeing this, the sisters-in-law began piling their laundry on me as well. I ended up folding Ava's and her sister's laundry. Completely turned into a housemaid, they even dumped childcare on me. Looking after 1 or 2 kids is the same. Please take care of my son. They'd say before leaving the newborn with me and going out to have fun with Ava and the family. Only Jackson stayed home, pretending not to notice anything and watching TV. I was shocked when even Lucas left with Ava and the others. From that moment, my affection for Lucas began to cool off. As I was taking care of the 2 babies, one of them would inevitably start crying. Then Jackson would explode in anger. The noise is so loud, I can't hear the TV. Finally got rid of the annoying bunch, and I can't even watch TV in peace. Jackson, usually quiet in front of Ava and her daughters, didn't hesitate to complain to me. I hated his silent pressure on regular days, but him yelling like this was just pathetic. The men in this house only act tough when the women aren't around, then badmouth them behind their backs. Especially Mason, who is amusing to watch because of his drastic two-faced nature. In front of Ava and the sisters-in-law, he's all smiles, serving food and drinks diligently. But when the women are absent, he's swapping nasty comments about their wives with Ethan. Not caring about how it affects me, his wife, they freely talk trash. Why do we have to come here every vacation and Christmas? I feel the same. It's nothing but torture for us husbands. Moreover, just between us, my marriage isn't going too well, so next time I might not be here. They'd say, laughing uproariously. Whether they're joking or serious. They don't care that I'm listening, the conversation escalates. Honestly, my marriage isn't great either. My wife is too domineering, always looking down on me. They glanced around, and seeing it was just me, they began whispering. My wife is just like her mother. Thinking about her getting even tougher with age is dreadful. Daughters do resemble their mothers, don't they? Recently, even her face is starting to look like her mother's, and it's creepy. Both of them were rolling on the floor, laughing at their own words. I began to wonder if Lucas also talked badly about me when I wasn't around. These two, laughing at such talk, would transform into entirely different people the moment Ava or the sisters-in-law appeared. They knew that if I told Ava or the sisters-in-law about their behavior, I would be the one accused of lying. That's why they felt free to speak ill of Ava and the sisters-in-law in front of me. Year by year, the workload dumped on me during the holidays at the in-laws grew heavier. Apart from meals, overnight arrangements, childcare, and laundry, now I was even tasked with picking up and dropping off Natalie's family. During a meal right before everyone was about to leave. I'd like a beer, but I have to drive home, so maybe I should refrain. Mason mentioned. Hearing this, Ava chimed in. From next time, let's have Olivia pick you up. That way, you can drink beer without any worries. She suggested to Mason. Mason, perhaps jokingly, agreed, but Ava took it seriously. No, you don't need to go that far, he said. But cutting off his words, Ava commanded. From now on, you will do the pickups. No one dared to object. In the car back home, even I, usually restrained, lashed out at Lucas. I'm already cooking, arranging accommodations, taking care of the kids, and even doing everyone's laundry. Now I have to do pickups too. Lucas, taken aback by my anger, was at a loss for words. Is there no limit to harassing your wife? How much more do they want to exploit me? My anger was justified. The in-laws' house was in a snowy region, making Christmas visits challenging. Natalie's house was a 2-hour drive one way, but in heavy snow, it could take nearly double that time. I knew Ava would expect me to finish cooking and then go pick up Natalie's family. Exhausted and asked to drive in such conditions was absurd. I'm not accustomed to long drives, and surely Natalie's family would be terrified too. I was furious that Lucas, knowing this, didn't stand up to Ava. I'm cutting ties with your family. I won't see Jackson, Ava, or your sisters ever again. I didn't want to see Ava or the sisters who did as they pleased. Hoping to calm my fury, he responded with a forced smile. Totally fine. I'll let Mom and everyone know, so don't worry. When Lucas talks smoothly like this, he's usually just trying to appease the situation. But with his agreement, I finally felt freed from the in-laws' clutches. I marvel at my own patience over the past 7 years of marriage. That Christmas, I went on a trip with Thomas and my parents. It was the first time since Thomas was born that I spent Christmas with my parents. It's rare for us to be together for Christmas. Is it okay for Lucas to go back to his parents alone? Having shared my in-laws' harsh treatment with them, my parents were surprised by the trip. It's okay. I have Lucas's permission, so he won't complain. I assured them, though I wasn't sure if Lucas had really talked to his parents. He had reluctantly agreed to cut ties with his family after my outburst, but I doubted his parents and sisters would accept it easily. They had been taking it easy so far, likely avoiding preparing meals themselves. However, they probably thought they could easily buy meals from the supermarket, so I assumed they weren't too worried. My parents, seeing their grandson Thomas after a long time, were overjoyed, and Thomas seemed to have fun too. When we visited the in-laws, I never had time to pay attention to Thomas, and I realized he must have felt lonely. Watching the three of them having fun, I completely forgot about the in-laws. Then, in the lobby of the luxurious hotel where we were relaxing, a familiar man walked in with a young woman on his arm. He resembled Mason, but he was supposed to be at the in-laws. The more I looked, the more he seemed familiar, and it appeared he noticed my stare. The man made a surprised face and quickly turned away. Likely because he was up to something shady. I pretended not to see and averted my gaze from the man. Just then, I received a call from Lucas. Hello, what's up? Please, can you come to the family home right now? It's chaos here, nothing is prepared. Haven't we agreed that I wouldn't go anymore from this year? I wasn't surprised, I had expected something like this. I did mention it, but it seems the message didn't get across. He replied. I figured he hadn't really talked to his parents. I had already informed them that I wouldn't be able to pick up Natalie's family. Natalie had complained, but it seemed she had been pacified. Lucas was desperately trying to get me to come back. But I was more focused on the commotion and what sounded like Natalie's voice in the background. Mason has run off with some woman. He said he was going to work, but when I called the office, they said he was off today. Hearing Natalie's words confirmed that the man I saw was indeed her husband. Mason is at the hotel we're staying at right now. I responded. Lucas was taken aback by the sudden shift in the conversation. What? My brother-in-law is there? I decided to tell the truth, thinking it would serve Natalie right for how she had treated me. Natalie must have heard Lucas's voice, as she snatched his mobile phone and started shouting at me. Mason is there! Where are you right now? Natalie screamed, almost rupturing my eardrums. Young and beautiful woman, high-class hotel. I replied. Next, Ava grabbed the phone and started yelling at me. How dare you go to a hotel on your own? You think that's acceptable? Even though they're shouting at me loudly, I can hear them. I've discussed this with Lucas. I have his permission to not associate with you anymore. I replied, deliberately provoking her. Ava started screaming something incomprehensible. Then Harper snatched the phone. We can't even have a meal without you. Please, somehow come back. Harper said, unusually polite, but I knew she only spoke like that when in trouble. In the background, Emma, Harper's ill-natured daughter, yelled, Olivia! Hurry up and prepare the meal! I couldn't help but laugh, realizing she was just echoing Harper's true feelings. The in-laws' house seemed to be in such a frenzy that I just hung up the phone. Since I had set my phone to reject calls, I didn't know what happened afterward until Lucas returned home. Seeing Lucas's reaction upon his return, I was prepared for the possibility of divorce. Worst case scenario, I was ready to make a life for Thomas and myself as an office worker. When Lucas returned from his parents' house, he apologized profoundly. I now understand how hard it's been for you all this time. I'm truly sorry. Lucas had been burdened with preparing the Christmas meal, doing everyone's laundry, and taking care of the kids, especially Natalie's child, throughout the holiday. Natalie, after hearing from me about the affair, had tracked Mason down to our hotel, apparently catching him in the act. Indeed, when we were leaving, the hotel staff seemed flustered, and there was talk of a quarreling couple. Perhaps that was her. Everyone had complained about Lucas's cooking, having never done it before. And, fed up with their nasty remarks. I'm cutting ties with this house too. I'm never coming back, he snapped. It seems Lucas has declared cutting ties as well. Hearing Lucas's declaration of disconnection, I felt relieved and confessed. If you hadn't decided to cut ties with your family, I was planning to divorce you. Smiling as I said this, Lucas began to cry and apologized again. I'm really sorry. Believing in his tears, I decided to keep striving together as a couple. From that year on, we decided to go on trips with my parents for Christmas. Both my parents and our family are delighted, and we intend to keep this tradition. Meanwhile, the in-laws' house doesn't seem to gather anyone anymore. Natalie and her husband divorced soon after. Natalie, having custody of the child, now had to work to support her life, leaving her with no long vacations or Christmases. Harper also realized that if the other siblings didn't return, she would have to prepare the meals herself, and didn't want to go through that hassle just to visit her parents' house. Left alone, the in-laws led a lonely life, unable to see their children or grandchildren. Ava, unable to harass anyone else, seemed to have turned her frustrations on Jackson, and I heard from Lucas that Jackson had left home. Lucas, deeply affected by the criticism of his cooking at the in-laws, has been cooking more often lately. Watching Lucas improve his cooking skills makes all that commotion feel like a distant memory. The poor couple, they must be here to mooch off their parents since they have no money. The peaceful Christmas atmosphere was shattered by my brother's harsh words. As he continued to spout insults and demanded more alcohol, I stayed silent. Then, "Do I look familiar to you?" My husband finally spoke up. "What? I have no reason to know you." My brother sneered condescendingly. "Is that so? Well then." Little did my brother know, these words would be his downfall. My name is Ava. I work in event planning at a company. I love interacting with people and having fun, and I consider my job my true calling. I've always prioritized work over romance. But there's someone who mocks me for it. That's my brother, Thomas. He works in a prestigious department at a top-tier company. He's always been brilliant, but his pride is too high, and he's looked down on me for years. You prioritize work over romance, and you're still single? That's just pathetic. You're just a poor, desperate woman living with her parents. Don't you dare become a burden on me in the future. A lonely life like yours is just tragic. Thomas never misses a chance to insult me, calling me a workaholic spinster. Our parents try to scold him, but he never shows any remorse, insisting he's only stating the truth. I used to argue back, but it only made things worse. Now, I just ignore him, as we rarely see each other. Despite his taunts, I recently met a man I liked. His name is Timothy. He's a contact person from a client company, unassuming but gentle and meticulous in his work. I was hoping to get closer to him, but then I learned from someone at his company that he had a girlfriend. Her name is Natalie. She's a striking beauty at the reception of his company, well known but also notorious for her relationships. Though it includes some bad language, there are rumors that she's dating more than one person at once. I've also heard that my company has also victims of her. I was curious about her, but I kept my distance, feeling it wasn't my place to interfere. One day, Timothy seemed really down during a meeting. "Timothy, you don't look well. This isn't urgent. Should we reschedule and I'll send you the details later?" "No, it's okay. I'm sorry for worrying you. Let's start." He tried to appear upbeat, but it was clear he wasn't himself. "The budget looks about right, don't you think?" "Timothy? Timothy? Oh, sorry. What were we talking about again?" I apologize. Seeing him so distracted, I decided to call off the meeting. Let's stop here for today, Timothy. I'll send you the materials and the points we need to review later. Ava, I'm really sorry for being such a hassle. Don't worry about it. You look unwell, maybe you should go home and rest. Thank you so much, but if I don't stay busy, I'll just keep thinking about it. His words struck a chord with me, and I couldn't help but say, if there's something on your mind, feel free to talk about it. It might help to get it off your chest. I shouldn't burden you with this, Ava. I'm here to listen, no matter what it is. I'd like to help you feel a bit better so you can focus on work. I tried to lighten the mood, and he managed a small smile. Thank you. Maybe I will talk. You see, I had a girlfriend I was thinking of marrying, but she just quit her job to marry another man. What? Natalie? I hadn't seen her at the reception lately. You knew about Natalie? She spent way more than she earned, and she often pressured me for expensive gifts. I recently told her to be more mindful about her spending. Then she suddenly cut off all contact. Today, I found out she quit her job. His story was heartbreaking, and I didn't know what to say. I called her, and she answered, but just to say she doesn't need a man who won't pay for her. She threatened to accuse me of stalking if I called again. I was just a cash cow, a victim of her cheating. I'm sorry, this is such a depressing story. Seeing his forced smile, I felt a surge of anger towards her. What's her deal? How can she treat people like that? Oh, I'm sorry, I got a little carried away. He looked surprised at my outburst, but soon smiled. Thank you. You're angry on my behalf. I was too shocked to really get angry. You're right, it's okay to be mad. Ava, thanks for listening. I feel a bit better now. He seemed a bit more upbeat. Timothy, are you free after work today? Times like these call for a drink to blow off some steam. I invited him for drinks, wanting to cheer him up. Sorry. I don't mean to impose. Seeing his shocked face, I suddenly felt embarrassed. No, thank you. After making you listen to all this, and now you're being so considerate. I guess we need to finish our work by the end of the day, then. He said with a smile and then looked down at the documents. I resumed the meeting, feeling a mix of embarrassment and happiness. After that day, we got closer. We started chatting over messages and hanging out on our days off. Our ways of thinking were similar, and I enjoyed his company. Just when I started wanting to spend more time with him, my brother suddenly announced he was bringing his fiancée home. I didn't want to see my brother, but my parents insisted I at least greet his fiancée. I was shocked when I saw who it was. His fiancée was Natalie. What? Natalie? You're marrying my brother? I blurted out in surprise. Oh, you're the girl from the event company that often comes to our office. Thomas's sister, right? She said with a smug smile. Choosing my brother over Timothy, Natalie, you really have no taste. What? Natalie was momentarily surprised, but then smirked. So you knew about him. Of course, I'd choose Thomas, a rising star in a top company, over some plain office worker. What's wrong with choosing a man with better specs? She spoke without a hint of remorse. My brother joined in the conversation. That Timothy guy, I've met him a few times through work. Plain and unimpressive. I'm obviously a better catch, so of course, she chose me. My brother laughed smugly, with Natalie nodding in agreement. I was disgusted by their attitude. Even my parents looked disappointed at their behavior. I refuse to acknowledge you two who are so arrogant that you look down on others as part of this family. Go ahead with your marriage or whatever, but don't ever come back. Dad said quietly, effectively disowning them. Enraged, my brother retorted. Even if you disown me, I won't be bothered. Kicking out your eldest son, you'll regret it later. He left with her. I felt relieved that I wouldn't have to see my brother again. But at the same time, I was troubled about whether to tell Timothy about this. After much thought, I decided to talk to him who had the right to know. I called him after work. "Ava, what's wrong? You look so serious." He looked at me with concern, and I gathered my courage to tell him. "Actually, my brother is getting married, and his fiancée is Natalie." "What?" "It seems they met through your company. I accidentally brought you up. She said choosing my successful brother over a regular employee like you was the right choice." "Yeah." "Both my brother and Natalie kept looking down on me and my parents, so my dad disowned them." "Is that so? I'm sorry for burdening you with this story." "No, thank you for telling me. I'd be lying if I said I'm not shocked, but it's not as bad as I thought it would be." I was surprised by how composed he seemed. Since then, I've realized I was just dazzled by her beauty and didn't see her true colors. Hearing about her marriage really got to me at first, but thanks to you, Ava, I've bounced back. Thank you for telling me. Seeing his smile made me feel relieved. "Ava, it might sound odd to say this now, but would you stay with me?" "What?" I was shocked by his sudden proposal. "I enjoy being with you, Ava. It's calming. Would you consider a serious relationship, with marriage in mind?" "Yes, I would be honored." I was truly happy to be dating the man I admired, Timothy. After 2 years of dating, we got married. On our first Christmas as a married couple, we visited my parents' house. Dad was happy to see us and started drinking with him. Dad loves alcohol but can't handle it well. Sure enough, he quickly got drunk, so Timothy took him to another room to take care of him. Right after that, the doorbell rang, and there stood my brother and his wife, who were supposed to be estranged. My brother knew about Dad's weakness for alcohol. He must have timed his visit, guessing Dad would be drunk from drinking since the afternoon on Christmas. Mom, knowing they were supposed to be estranged, was hesitant to let them in. Barging in, my brother said, "Your dad's probably useless by now. Hurry up and get us some drinks, and serve some fancy food." Natalie went straight to the bathroom without asking. She said just, "I'll use the restroom." While Mom and I stood dumbfounded. "What's all this noise about?" Timothy came out from the back. My brother glared at Timothy and barked. "Who the hell are you?" "Oh, are you Ava's brother?" "I'm her husband, Timothy." My brother looked at him and sneered. "A perfect match for a plain Jane like Ava. Did you two come to mooch off your parents' house? I don't want to see your faces on Christmas. Get out of here." My brother had mocked Timothy for being plain and unimpressive, but he didn't seem to remember his face clearly. After telling us to leave, he started demanding food and drinks from Mom. Timothy, who had been watching my brother quietly, spoke up. "Do you really not recognize me?" "What?" "I have no reason to know you," my brother said, looking puzzled at Timothy. "Is that so? You don't remember me? Then, we'll have to cancel our future business dealings." "What? Business? Are you out of your mind?" My brother mocked him, just as Natalie walked in. "Sorry for the wait. Why is Timothy here?" Natalie was surprised to see Timothy. "He's Ava's husband. He's babbling some nonsense about business dealings." "What? You married this girl, Timothy? Whatever. As if someone like you could affect Thomas's company's business deals." Natalie laughed mockingly. Timothy, looking exasperated, said, "Do you remember my last name?" "What are you talking about?" "It's Smith, right?" "And the name of the president of the parent company of your former employer?" "What? What's with you all of a sudden?" "I think it was Smith." "Wait. Smith?" My brother's face went pale in shock. "Oh please, Thomas. Smith is such a common last name. There's no way this guy is related to the CEO." Natalie said dismissively, but Timothy pressed on. "Unfortunately for you, I am the CEO's son. Luckily, there are several Smiths in the company and its parent company, so my identity stayed hidden." What? Really? Yep. I worked at a subsidiary for training, but after getting married, I returned to the parent company. I'm now responsible for several important projects, including the dealings with Thomas's company. My brother and Natalie were speechless, their faces ashen. Thomas's company is indeed considered top tier in the industry, but that seems to have bred some arrogant employees. I've heard they've been making unreasonable demands, so I've been thinking about revisiting our dealings. Wait, Timothy, why didn't you tell me you're the son of a major company CEO? Natalie asked in a fluster. I planned to tell you once we were engaged. I told Ava after we decided to get married. True, he told me after the proposal. I was surprised, but titles don't really matter to me. I answered nonchalantly, and Natalie screamed in disbelief. What? If I had known he was the CEO's son, I would have married him. What do you mean by that? My brother, still pale, confronted Natalie. Timothy, looking exasperated, said, Please leave, the disowned family members. You're not welcome here. He ushered them out. My brother, looking pathetic, begged to reconsider the business dealings, but Timothy ignored him and closed the door. The ousted couple argued outside for a while before fleeing under the watchful eyes of the neighbors. It seems that he ran home because he was worried about what his neighbors would notice. Later, Timothy canceled the business dealings with my brother's company. My brother, already known for his poor attitude towards colleagues, was fired for losing a major client. He boasted about finding a new job quickly, but his bad reputation made it difficult. After that incident, Natalie started pestering Timothy, saying, I want us to get back together. Or even, I don't mind being just a mistress. Started following him around. However, when Timothy threatened, I'll sue you for stalking, she finally stopped. Both my brother and his wife were extravagant spenders. Even after his dismissal, they couldn't adjust their lifestyle and quickly became engulfed in debt. My brother repeatedly reached out for help, but I ignored all his requests. Eventually, tired of his constant contact, I deleted all his contact information. I have no idea what happened to them after that. I vowed never to become someone who looks down on others like them. Together with Timothy, I decided to build a happy and respectful family. I'm Isabella. I really dislike my parents. What bothers me the most is their obsession with what others think. They use their affectionate behavior towards me to win over people's approval. It seems like that's all that matters to them. So, at home, they were very strict with me. I was constantly nagged about etiquette and how to speak properly, down to the smallest detail. Naturally, I rebelled against that, but they never listened to what I had to say. All that mattered to them was appearing as good people in the eyes of others. They wanted me to play the role of a quiet, well-behaved child. As a young girl, I just convinced myself that it was how things were supposed to be. How long would I have to endure this? Would I have to live with this dissatisfaction forever? I want to get out of this house as soon as possible. Even as a child, I was consumed by this thought. But unexpectedly, a turning point came much sooner. It was when I was in elementary school. My sister Chloe was born. And she was much more pretty than me. It was only a matter of time before our parents' interest shifted from me to her. Eventually, all their love and attention fully turned to her. Thankfully, it allowed me to distance myself from my parents. I can finally be free, I thought, but it turned out they weren't done with me. I realized it during my senior year of high school. It was when I told my parents I wanted to get a job. Of course, I had always thought about leaving home since I was little. Graduating high school was my chance to leave. I had been looking forward to that opportunity for so long. But then, my father said something completely unexpected. No way! You're going to college! I was shocked by his forceful tone. Lately, my parents had been so focused on Chloe. I thought they would easily agree. Maybe he had some expectations for my future. Why do I have to go to college? With a glimmer of hope, I asked him. His response shattered my expectations completely. You need a decent education to marry well, you know. So that was it. I finally understood why my parents were so concerned about appearances. They were planning to use my marriage prospects to make their own lives easier.
I want to work,
I protested.
Then, are you going to pay for your moving expenses yourself?
He retorted. His words left me speechless. Given their concern for appearances, my parents had always given me an allowance. But I didn't have enough to afford a move. Moreover, my high school prohibited part-time jobs. There was virtually no way for me to earn the moving expenses myself. He knew it, which is why he said it. As I struggled to respond, he laughed.
We've spent quite a lot on raising you. Maybe you should pay us back for that?
That's...
If you don't like it, go to college,
he concluded. In the end, I couldn't argue back. But if I looked at it differently, they were offering to send me to college for free. As much as they might want to, they couldn't just force marriage or arranged matches on me against my will. So, I decided to obediently go to college, and then escape after graduation. After that, I enrolled in a local college. But since my education was just for the sake of appearances, I wasn't allowed to live alone. My father never really considered my academic pursuits at college.
I'll pay your tuition, but in return, you'll have to work part-time and contribute to the household expenses,
he said shortly after I started college. How much should I contribute? I asked.
Let's say $500 a month.
I wanted to focus on my studies, now that I was in college. But he would never listen to such a request. Reluctantly, I juggled part-time work with my college lectures. The amount I had to contribute as living expenses was no small sum. With reports and test studies, I could only work a few hours each day. It was a barely manageable amount.
But I don't want to waste this opportunity.
So, I sacrificed sleep, splitting my time between studying and part-time work. Eventually, I graduated from college and even secured a job at a real estate company.
Now I can finally leave home.
That's what I thought, but my plan was naive. When I told my father about my job, he said,
"It's fine for you to work, but you can't live alone." "Why not?"
I asked, puzzled.
"What if you end up with some bad guy if you live alone?"
Huh?
Anyway, stay at home until you get married.
That's ridiculous.
Or can you pay back your college tuition right now? If so, I might consider letting you live alone.
That's impossible. I've been contributing part-time earnings to the household.
Then, give up on living alone,
he said with a loud laugh. It seemed he had planned everything. Anticipating that, he had made me contribute to the household expenses. In the end, it was a life dictated by him. Was there no way for me to fight back? With these worries, I started working. But then, a new problem arose. He quit his job shortly after I started working. The reason was back pain. Of course, that was just a facade. He just didn't want to work anymore, and was clearly relying on my income. Still, I couldn't abandon my family. I had even researched ways to cut ties with them, wanting to become a stranger. But there's no way to completely sever ties with family. Parents will always be parents. There's no escaping that. Yet, I hadn't given up on escaping from home. Believing that one day I could live on my own, I diligently saved money. But my father would surely notice my plans. Several years had passed since I started working. One day, when I got home from work, there was a cake on the table. "What's this about?" I asked Chloe, and she replied with a smile. "I got accepted into college." "Really? Congratulations."
"Thank you."
Chloe clapped her hands in joy. I felt happy for her too, but then my father's next words instantly dampened my mood.
"Okay, so you'll be paying her tuition."
"What? I have to pay it?"
"Of course. I can't work because of my injury."
What a thing to say. He looks perfectly healthy to anyone, but arguing with him would be pointless. It's true that he has no income. If I don't pay for Chloe's education, she won't be able to go to college. He knows that and is unabashed about it. That means my plans to live alone are pushed even further away. In his eyes, he gets Chloe's education and keeps me from moving out. Chloe is a good girl. Her presence allowed me, as a young girl, to keep my distance from our parents. I may not be close to Chloe, but I owe her that much. So, I decided to pay for her tuition.
Looks like living alone just got further away.
That night, I ended up drinking alone late into the night, grumbling about my father. Later, Chloe safely started college. I worked even harder to pay for her tuition. However, such a lifestyle naturally took its toll, and I started to feel worn out. One day, distracted by fatigue, I left my wallet at the entrance and left the house. Arriving at the bus station, I reached for my IC card to board the bus and realized I didn't have my wallet.
Shoot. I left my wallet.
I quickly remembered leaving it at the entrance. I called my mother, who was at home, and she said, "Chloe took your wallet to you. She had to go to college for something." "She did?" She said she'd drop it off on her way. I immediately started running back home. Then, a few minutes from the bus stop, near a grocery store, I ran into Chloe. She was carrying a shopping bag from the store. "Chloe, do you have my wallet?" "Here it is." She handed me my wallet. I immediately checked the contents. "You're so suspicious," she teased. "I have the company's card in there. If I lose it, it's trouble for the company." The corporate card and the IC card were both inside. The money was untouched, and I felt relieved. "Thanks, Chloe." I thanked her and hurried back to the bus stop. Thanks to her, I managed to avoid being late.
I need to be more careful from now on.
That night, I bought a thank you cake for Chloe. She was delighted, and I was grateful. But at that time, I was making a big mistake. Some days later, Aria from accounting came to me at work.
"Can I talk to you for a sec, Isabella?"
She was a very reliable colleague. She often gave me clothes and cosmetics she didn't need, as I was living frugally. In many ways, I owed her a lot, both professionally and personally. So, I thought she wanted to talk about something personal, but it turned out to be a bit different, and Aria took me to a private place. "What's going on, Aria?"
"Listen. I wanted to ask you, have you ever used the company card for personal reasons?"
The company card she referred to was the corporate card. Designed for managing expenses in one place, the company had issued these cards to employees. Of course, as a salesperson, I also had a company-issued card. However, the charges were to be billed to the corporate account. So, using the card for personal reasons would be immediately noticeable. I think I've only used it during work hours," I replied, feeling anxious. I didn't recall doing anything wrong, but I couldn't completely rule out the possibility of it being used without my knowledge. As I was pondering, she said,
"Actually, your card was used at a grocery store. It looks like it was for buying water. Do you remember? Grocery store, water."
I thought hard about it. Then, I remembered the day I forgot my wallet. For a brief moment that day, Chloe had my wallet. I normally never let anyone else handle my wallet, especially at work. Therefore, if someone else used the card, it had to have been Chloe on that day. "Well, do you know the date it was used?" I didn't want to suspect Chloe. I asked Aria, hoping to prove it wasn't her. If the card was used on a different day, then she wouldn't be the culprit. I must have been absent-minded and accidentally used the company card. That's what I wanted to believe, but reality was harsh. The card had been used on the very day I forgot my wallet.
"Is there anything you can recall?"
Aria asked. On impulse, I blurted out,
"Oh. I might have mistaken it for my IC card."
"Really?"
"I sometimes buy water before work."
"I see.
I'm really sorry about that."
I paid the amount that had been charged right there. I made excuses in a panic, but Aria comforted me, saying,
"Don't worry, I've made the same mistake before."
I was worried it might happen again. Driven by anxiety, I asked Aria for a favor right then and there.
"Are you sure? It'll be extra work for you, Isabella."
"Yes. I don't want to repeat the same mistake."
"Okay, I'll take care of it."
"Thank you so much." Thus, I managed to avoid turning it into a big issue. But I knew there wouldn't be a second chance. If something similar happened again, it would surely be a major problem. That's why I took the initiative. That incident was a significant turning point for me. I had always thought Chloe was a good girl, but she was a child doted on by our father. She never rebelled against him. If she's aware of everything, maybe she's just pretending to be good, not just outside the house, but in front of me as well. At that moment, I found her smile strangely frightening. My parents were trying to use me for their own benefit. So, I was already cautious of them, especially my father. But now, I had to be wary of Chloe too.
What should I do?
The thought of living with my parents and Chloe became scary. I had always wanted to leave, but now more than ever. After much thought, I confided in my boyfriend, Timothy. "Why don't we get married then?" he said casually. I was at a loss for words. He smiled. "If we're married, you can leave your house. I'm a civil servant, so they probably won't object."
That's true.
He and I were classmates in college. We'd been dating for over 5 years, and I had been thinking it might be time. But I had my family to consider. I couldn't easily say yes to marriage. However, I had told him about my family's problems. He had listened and advised me on various things. Despite all that, he was still willing to marry me.
Please, I'd appreciate it.
So, I decided to get married. But it wasn't just happiness filling me up. There were too many problems, especially with my father. It wasn't certain that he would agree to the marriage.
I'll have to persuade him carefully.
I decided to take my time convincing him. But as I hesitated to bring up the topic of marriage at home, time just passed by. Half a year went by like that.
I need to say something soon.
I thought to myself. Then, unexpectedly, my father and I got into an argument. "Enough! I've told you many times to marry the person I introduced." "That's impossible! I'm seeing someone." "What? Who is the guy?" "He's a civil servant. A good person." He fell silent at my words and seemed to be thinking. I took the chance to say, "He's willing to give a generous dowry. That should satisfy you, right?" He looked hesitant. That could work. I decided to push through. "How much should the dowry be?" $30,000. I thought that was a lot. But when I mentioned it to Timothy, he agreed to provide it. Thus, with his help, I was able to leave my home. Once the decision was made, everything else went smoothly. I started preparing to move right away. Then, on a certain Sunday, I arranged for the movers to come. During the move, Chloe approached me. "Just keep your promise to pay for my tuition, okay?" "That's fine, but can I ask you something?" "You've used my card without permission, haven't you?" "Oh, you found out, huh?" she said, without any sign of remorse. I had tried several times to confront her about the truth, but never got the chance. I gathered my courage to ask, but it seemed like no big deal to her. Using someone else's card is a crime. Do you understand that? "It's fine, we're family, aren't we?" she replied, showing no guilt. I was infuriated. "I'll deposit the tuition money into the designated account. But that's it. Consider it severance." "Huh? Once I leave this house, we're strangers." "Do whatever you want." She walked off with a scoff. Later that evening, when the moving was done, I went to the living room where my father was waiting. "Where's the money?" "It's always about money with you." "Here it is." "I've always dreamed of profiting from marrying you off to someone well off since you were born." "Well, this should be enough. I've contributed plenty to this house already." "Yeah, now it's all up to Chloe's future spouse." He smirked, his comment dripping with sarcasm. He might keep coming back to ask for more money. That thought makes me angry. But when that time comes, I'll just have to turn him away. Then we had our last meal as a family. Chloe wasn't there, though. According to my mother, she was out with friends. Better not to see her. After the meal, I gathered my belongings and decided to leave the house. But as I was leaving, I ran into Chloe. "Oh? Still here, Isabella? Ah, right, here, I'm returning this." Without a word, she handed something over. I looked down and saw it was the company card. I quickly checked my wallet. "Only realizing now? I took it when I was in your room." "You're so clueless." I clenched my teeth. Clearly, she had used it without permission. That's when it hit me. Chloe brazenly admitted, "I used your card for drinks and meals for about 100 people, so check it up." Then, without being asked, she started telling me all about it. She talked about a reunion she had and going to an all-you-can-eat, one thing after another. She even mentioned choosing an expensive restaurant, thinking about the card's limit. That really made me angry. So, I retorted, "Who are you, exactly?"
What? You were serious about us being strangers once you left home? But what about the tuition fee?
She kept bothering me about it.
The bank card for the tuition fees has been given to Dad,
I said, and quickly walked away. Afterwards, I joined Timothy and started our new married life. Nothing much changed, though. I continued working, and the only real change was our home. But that was the biggest change for me. I was filled with a sense of freedom I had never felt before. I hoped this happiness would last a long time while enjoying life with him. About half a year went by. One day at work, Chloe showed up.
"You're here! Come out!"
She caused a scene at the company reception. Hearing it, I rushed to the reception. "Chloe."
"There you are! What do you think you're doing, you liar?"
She yelled the moment she saw me. She started shouting at me, showing me her bank card.
"I got a call saying the tuition couldn't be withdrawn, and I was embarrassed, you know."
"What are you talking about?" "I made sure to deposit it."
"Huh? But it clearly hasn't been withdrawn."
"Don't you even know how to check your bank card? Are you really a university student?"
"Of course I am, 4th year at a national university. I've even secured a job,"
she yelled. Sighing, I explained, "I deposited this year's $5,000 tuition fee. Here's the deposit record, see?"
"That's exactly it. That amount was withdrawn from the card. You must have done it."
"It was you who withdrew it, right?"
"I don't even have a card." "So it was you."
"But I heard you paid for foods for 100 people with it, didn't I?"
"Foods? What foods?"
"Don't you remember paying for an all-you-can-eat for 100 people with the card?" As I questioned her, her face turned pale. In a panic, she started making excuses.
I used your company card, but it's a corporate card, so."
Clearly, she didn't understand. So, I explained to her carefully. A corporate card withdraws from the corporate account. That's correct knowledge.
"So, the card I used was..."
"But once, someone used my card without permission. So, I had the withdrawals changed to my personal account."
"Personal account?"
What I had was indeed a corporate card. That was when I realized. The withdrawals were being made from my personal account, not the corporate account. That setup, while involving more paperwork for expense claims, allowed for private use of the card. Essentially, it eliminated the need to carry multiple cards. Plus, if someone else used it, the company wouldn't suffer any damage. Meaning, when she paid for the drinks, it was already set to withdraw from my personal account. So, the amount for the drinks is gone. It's your responsibility since you used it.
"What about the university tuition?"
"I paid what was asked of me. You'll have to figure out the rest." With that, she began to make even more noise. Eventually, the police arrived and restrained her.
"No! That's not me!"
"What do you mean? You admitted to using my card."
"That was..."
"I clearly told you. Using someone's card without permission is a crime."
"But..."
"Think about what you've done." In the end, she was taken to the police station for questioning. However, I didn't file a complaint. I didn't see the need, especially since someone had uploaded her outburst at my company on social media. Unsurprisingly, it quickly drew a wave of criticism. She ended up being expelled from her university. After that, my parents, who concerned about appearances, moved to the countryside with her. It seemed they thought they could escape the scandal by leaving town. Their plan was to find a marriage partner for Chloe there and then extort money from him. But given their bad characters, it was unlikely to work. I heard they quickly got into trouble with Chloe's new partner.
"Isabella! We're being sued for damages! Help us!"
My father contacted me about a month after I moved. Causing trouble within just a month, they would likely repeat the same mistakes.
"I'm sorry, but if you come to our house, I'll file a complaint about the previous incident.
Be prepared for that." After I said that, he stopped contacting me. But with no money and no job, I couldn't help but worry. So, I had a private investigator secretly check on them, and they turned out to be working together at a logistics warehouse. Apparently, it was the company of the person Chloe had clashed with. They must have been told to work off the debt if they couldn't pay it. Hearing they were working long hours in a gloomy warehouse, I felt a bit relieved. They should be able to pay off the damages and earn their living expenses. I decided to let them fend for themselves and keep working. Meanwhile, Timothy and I continued our happy married life. My job was going well, and my sales performance was steadily improving. With no family around, money was accumulating. All that good fortune made me a little apprehensive about the future. But for now, I want to fully enjoy this happiness I've finally attained with Timothy. I'm Madison. I have a husband and 2 children. After a long time, I returned to my hometown. Though I say hometown, it's actually my brother and his wife live there now. Both my parents have passed away. Looking at this house brings back memories. It's the place where the most significant event of my life took place. Now, it's a fond memory. Yes, it happened over 30 years ago. I was 32 years old and was married to a different man than my current husband. My ex-husband, John, and I were the same age. We had been married for 2 years. We didn't have any children yet. We met at work. Back then, I was a temp worker, and when I was sent to my husband's company, he was the one in charge of my training. Initially, he was reliable and decisive, which is why I married him. But gradually, I've started to notice some unsettling things. The in-laws' house, while not exactly close, is at a distance we can manage to travel if we decide to, and occasionally, I get summoned to do this or that. Sometimes I'm made to clean or cook. I'm sent shopping, and even tasked with rearranging the rooms. "It's pitiful for my son to have to eat such meals every day," is a common remark. John has 2 sisters, and they both live in the in-laws' house as well. Even when I'm busy with chores at the in-laws' house, those 2 don't bother to help. Well, having them hovering around would be annoying anyway, so I don't mind, but I do wonder what they think. Do they see me as nothing more than a servant, being the wife of their brother? Since I don't live with them, I can bear it for a while and get through it without causing a fuss, as it's too much trouble to argue about every little thing. I guess this is what marriage is about. After all, we're all human, and not everyone gets along. Maybe they have complaints about me, too, and managing to get along on the surface is the best we can hope for. I try my best to follow their instructions, but the in-laws are the type to persistently nitpick and bully. I doubt I'll ever grow fond of them. And then they insist on living together. I can't comprehend the mentality of wanting to live with someone you don't like. It would be fine if John firmly refused, but for some reason, he sides with the in-laws' house and keeps nagging me. So, putting on a forced smile and skillfully dodging the issue has become our usual interaction. Until recently, John and I lived in the company housing of the company he worked for, but due to a significant change in income caused by his job change, we ended up living at my brother's house. We had to leave the company housing but couldn't find a new place to move to, and the deadline was approaching, so I consulted my brother and ended up staying with him. Incidentally, John changed jobs without consulting me. My parents moved to Anchorage, so only my brother was left at home. So now, it's John and I living with my brother in this house, which is quite spacious. Maybe that's why the in-laws' house people also wanted to move in. My brother, David, is 35 and is planning to get married in 2 months, in July. So honestly, it's not the time to let people from the in-laws' house move in, and we even want to move out before then. That's why I've been actively looking for a new place, but John doesn't seem too keen. I don't feel his intent to move out of this house. I can't just decide on a new place to move by myself, and while it's okay not to actively search for one, I at least wish he'd participate in the discussions. But whenever I talk about moving, he doesn't really listen and tries to change the subject quickly. I often wonder if he understands his position. Housework is mainly done by my brother or me, and he would casually take things from the fridge to snack on with his drinks. He seems way too relaxed. Well, I don't want him to be too mindful, But when living with your wife's brother, shouldn't a person be a bit more considerate? But then, I don't really know how people in such situations behave in other families, and maybe my husband is just tired from work. It's not something to get angry about, but I do find it somewhat awkward. One day, when my affection for my husband was gradually diminishing, an incident happened. My brother had to go on a long business trip and asked us to look after the house. So, for a while, it was just my husband and me living in the house, but then I received a call from my brother. I had a change of plans and will be coming back today. If I make it back before dinner, let's go out and have a nice meal with your husband. He informed me that he would be coming back earlier than planned. I had been on a day trip with a friend from early in the morning, but I planned to be back before dinner, so there was no problem. I was excited, thinking, brother's treat. On the way home, the roads were surprisingly clear, and the day trip ended earlier than expected. While walking home, wondering what to eat, and carrying souvenirs, I bumped into my brother on his way back. Chatting and laughing with my brother, we soon arrived in front of the house, only to see an unfamiliar truck parked there, and I could hear the voices of children and elderly people that I recognized. Wondering what it was, I saw John and his sister carrying out a familiar dresser. Moreover, the dresser they were taking was from my brother's room. What are you doing? I raised my voice and approached them, and his sister exclaimed, Huh? Weren't you away on a business trip? John turned pale. Hey! Come here! My brother dragged him into the house. I could hear noises coming from inside. From my brother's room. Following my brother dragging him, I headed to my brother's room, where I saw the aftermath of various items being moved out, and my husband's sister's 2 children and the in-laws freely roaming around. The one I saw in front of the house was Mia, who is 31 and married. She has 2 children, aged 6 and 4. There's also a 17-year-old sister in the in-laws' house, but she doesn't seem to be here today. What's the meaning of this mess? Oh? I heard you were out today. I came back. Now, answer my question. Well, we were thinking of moving in here. What? Who gave you permission for that? Permission? We're already family, so it's fine, isn't it? Besides, haven't we asked several times? And haven't we refused every time? This is utterly unreasonable. It's not a big deal. Stop being so selfish and learn to compromise a little. Don't mess with me, old woman. Just as I was about to get angry, my brother lost his temper. And rightly so. This is my brother's house. This is a waste of time dealing with such idiots. Hey, kick all these people out. My brother shouted at my husband. Mother-in-law Sophia was making a fuss about how the elderly are treated, but no one paid her any mind. The in-laws and Mia's children were pushed onto Mia, and they were forcibly sent away. My brother caught John as he was about to leave with them and angrily shoved him into the closet. Apparently, my brother was often locked in the closet when he was scolded as a child, so it was a reflex action. I was already losing affection for John, but I didn't intend to divorce him. However, this was just too much. It was a huge disappointment. What were you doing? Please, let me out of here. Answer the question, what were you doing? Don't stay silent, answer me. I'm scared. Scared? Can't you explain what you've done? I'm sorry, please forgive me. Before talking about forgiving, tell me what you did. I'm sorry, I'm sorry. What kind of adult cries like that? Answer me quickly. Realizing that this conversation was going nowhere, my brother left John locked in the closet and went to inspect the room. We caught them taking out the dresser, but who knows what else they've stolen. And there were unfamiliar items scattered around. It seems they've also brought things in from somewhere else. I was tasked with making sure John didn't escape. It appears that most of the stolen items were from my brother's room. When my brother came back and kicked the closet while yelling, John screamed inside. My brother was quite heated, so I decided to conduct the interrogation. Hey, what were you doing? Planning to steal and sell things? By the way, the dresser that had been moved out was ordered to be put back by the culprits themselves.
No, I wouldn't do that. Then where were you planning to take that dresser and the rest? Well,
John clammed up, so my brother kicked the closet. John answered while raising his voice.
I was going to put them in a rental storage. Why would you do that? Well,
according to him, the arrangement was for Mia's family and her children to live in the in-laws' house, and in-laws, he and I were to live in this house. Of course, I knew nothing about it. He thought that if his own room disappeared, my brother would have to move out somewhere else.
Don't you understand whose house this is? I'm sorry.
Further probing revealed that they chose my brother's room because it gets the best sunlight, planning to make it the in-laws' room. They figured once they moved in, we wouldn't have the heart to kick out the frail elderly. Also, since my brother is still single and doesn't need a large house, and since John and I might have children and need more space in the future, it seemed best to them that my brother move out. And today, they decided to go ahead with their plan since both my brother and I were supposed to be away. However, we returned earlier than they anticipated, and that's how we ended up catching them in the act.
I can't believe this guy. I had no idea he could be this foolish.
I was shocked that I failed to see how utterly unreasonable the person I married could be.
How can you even think this is okay? It's way too far-fetched. I can't understand your thought process at all.
It seemed like my brother's anger was overtaken by disbelief for a moment. Did he seriously think he could take over someone's house, force us to move out, and that we would just quietly accept it? Unless he believed the world revolved around him, I can't fathom how he came up with such an idea. Looking around my brother's room, I noticed unnatural gaps in the shelves where he kept his games and manga.
Hey, you took the games and manga, didn't you? Did you move those to the storage too?
It felt odd if he was planning to move everything to the rental storage, so I asked, and John fell silent again.
Answer me.
I pounded on the closet, urging him to respond.
I lent them to my sister. What? You can't just lend out someone else's stuff.
He was spot on.
I was planning to return them before you got back. That's not the point.
Further questioning revealed that he had been doing this for some time, lending things out bit by bit so it wouldn't be noticed. This time, he got bold because my brother was away from home for a while.
And you took the model kits too, didn't you?
My brother loves model kits and has many in his room. Just earlier, Mia's kids had broken some, and he was furious. He also has many unopened model kits in boxes. I don't quite understand it, but it seems to be a thing among model kit enthusiasts. He's been hoarding them, planning to build them eventually. I sometimes wonder why he buys so many, but they are his, after all.
I just gave them away because my sister's kids wanted them.
John confessed in a barely audible voice.
Don't just give away someone's treasured items. Some of them are rare. Do you even understand your position? You moved in here because you don't earn enough, didn't you? And by the way, this house belongs to our parents. We've talked about this before, right? Even if you managed to drive my brother out, it wouldn't become yours. How can you not understand that? Don't disappoint me too much.
The in-laws had been demanding we live together. I always brushed them off, but maybe I should have firmly refused, considering it came to this. Though, I never could have predicted something like this. My brother dragged John out. He was almost crying. My brother made him write a letter of reflection, while John meekly wrote the letter, stumbling over his words. This wasn't the kind of situation that could be resolved with a letter of reflection. Unsure what to do, I called our parents and reported what happened. They suggested calling the police and a lawyer, so I did as advised. The lawyer gave me a number to call, which was a relief. After the lawyer arrived and we discussed the situation, it turned out that the case was somewhat ambiguous, so we ended up settling. We had the in-laws write an affidavit, agreeing to sue them in civil court only if they breached the agreement. At the same time, I also discussed the possibility of divorcing him. Since we don't have children and don't share much property, the process should be smooth. The amount I could receive from the divorce settlement would be minimal, but considering our living situation, I wasn't expecting a large sum anyway. I had Mia return the items she had borrowed earlier. My brother was checking their condition. The manga had oil stains and some scribbles on it. The games and model kits seemed to be intact. We decided to have the in-laws take back all the manga and compensate us with new ones later. It seems the in-laws are quite weak when faced with authorities like the police or lawyers, as they complied quite obediently, which was frightening in its own way. When things had somewhat calmed down, I asked John again, and it turned out he thought it was unthinkable to refuse to live with the in-laws since we got along well with them. He assumed it was just out of politeness. He was sure that deep down, we wanted to live together. He thought that my brother-in-law, being kind, would give up his room for Mia's happiness. And wouldn't kick out the elderly since he's so kind. He was convinced that my brother would agree. I sighed. Did John mistake me and my brother for saints or something? Sure, I don't like the in-laws, but as a wife, I tried to maintain a proper relationship, and thanks to that, things seemed to go quite well on the surface. My brother also treated John with a certain degree of courtesy because he was my husband. I guess that's why he got the impression that we are kind people. But that's just a normal part of human interaction. In maintaining smooth human relations, people put on a mask, so to speak, utter social niceties, and say things they don't mean. And the other person, understanding that, doesn't take the words or attitudes at face value but tries to imagine the real intention behind them and thinks about how to react appropriately. In this way, while gauging the distance between each other, if one thinks the other person is someone they can get closer to, they gradually show their true selves. John was fatally bad at this. He tried to fit other people's feelings into a frame that was convenient for him. That's not how human relationships work. I explained all this to him. It might have been the last bit of sentiment I had for him as his wife. There are rare individuals who are thoroughly bad at this. Through interacting and engaging with many people in life, one gradually comes to understand and practice this. It's hard to explain and even harder to teach. The only solution is to gain experience by interacting with many people. I told him that this was what he needed. Whether he took my rather self-righteous lecture as just an expression of my anger or as words born from consideration for him, I left that for him to decide. At that point, I didn't feel enough attachment left to bother myself with him anymore. The in-laws were generally quiet. It seemed they were worried that legal action might affect the younger sister's education and future prospects. When I mentioned divorce,
"You can't just decide to leave him,"
they initially protested. "Shall we proceed with mediation, then?" She fell silent. It turned out that Mia and her family were the reason why the in-laws wanted to move into our house. Mia had moved back into the in-laws' house some time ago, but she didn't do any housework, and her husband, despite working, didn't contribute to the household expenses. Her children were noisy and destructive, interfering with the younger sister's study for her exams. They thought our house would be quieter, and it would be an opportunity to educate me as a wife. They figured that once they moved their stuff in, we wouldn't be able to object strongly, and given the circumstances, we would accept them. This was how they convinced John and led to this whole mess. The apple doesn't fall far from the tree. I felt utterly drained all at once. John was currently packing up the items he had brought from the in-laws' house. A moving company was scheduled to pick them up in the afternoon. Of course, the in-laws were going to cover the cost. I was ready to put an end to this, but my brother seemed unsatisfied. Determined to straighten out John's character, he had him doing housework and cleaning. Until now, John always excused himself from helping by saying, "I'm too tired," while my brother and I did all the housework. Maybe my brother had also had enough of it. John had been too relaxed in our house, freely eating and drinking whatever he liked without helping with chores. It was okay, but it was frustrating how he just went about his business without a word, and things would be gone before we knew it. My brother wanted to settle that score before kicking him out. By the way, John and I were sleeping in separate rooms. We ate separately, and I didn't keep any personal gadgets like phones or computers in his room, just housing magazines. And miraculously, the divorce was finalized, and he finally left the house. The other day, my brother and I reminisced about the whole ordeal. After all that, I met another man, built a family, and now it's been over 30 years. Life sure has its ups and downs, but being able to look back calmly probably means I'm happy now.
Hello there. Am I narrow-minded, or is my husband too naive? I've had an argument with my husband, and it's really drained me emotionally. My name is Alice, and I'm in my 30s. My husband's name is Martin. We have one child, Mia, who will soon be in the 3rd grade of elementary school. Including my dad, we were living as a family of 4. My dad retired, but a certain company reached out and asked him to work abroad for about 2 years. He's already left for overseas, so now it's just the 3 of us. The fuss started because of my nephew, Philip, who's planning to go to college. Since we live closer to his college than his own home does, Martin was asked if Philip could stay with us while he attends school. The idea is that he would live with us until he can save up enough money from a part-time job to become independent. But there is no clear indication of how much money he needs to save or by when, so I have no idea. As far as I'm concerned, I was opposed to having a young man, who I only see at long family vacations, living under the same roof as me and Mia. I work from home, so I'm even less keen on the idea. When I told Martin my thoughts, he had an unexpected reaction. "How can you not trust Philip?" He was angry, and now we are in a stalemate, unwilling to give an inch. When Martin was first contacted about this, everyone, Martin, Thomas, Thomas's wife, and even Philip himself, seemed totally on board with the idea. Philip even directly told Martin that he'd like to be taken care of by us. Martin initially brushed it off, saying, "Mia is young, she won't mind. In fact, she might be happy to have an older brother." He seemed not to grasp the issue at all. How can she look up to a distant relative she hardly knows as an older brother? And so the argument continues. We're getting nowhere. Given that I own the house and it's under my name, I suggested, "I think we should wait for Dad to return to the country and discuss it together." However, Martin resisted. "You don't have to involve Stephen in this. We can just settle it over the phone. It's high time you became independent." He was not willing to listen at all. I started doubting whether I could trust what Martin was saying. The house is old, but it has plenty of rooms. I suspected that Martin and my in-laws had discussed this, and Martin wanted to keep a good face with Thomas. We text during work, but the gap between us remains. Martin texted me, "You can decide what to do, but you don't have to talk to Stephen until you've made up your mind. We have extra rooms, so there's no reason to say no." His opinion hasn't changed. He insists we can tell Dad after the decision is made. He's not giving an inch. I can't help but think anyone would be upset if their relatives were moved into their house without their consent, especially when they're not even around. But Martin shows no understanding. By the way, when I checked if they're planning to live for free just because they're relatives, he said, they are willing to pay $200. That should be enough for one person. $200 based on what standard? Do the in-laws think that's sufficient? I'm pretty sure that's not enough, no matter how you look at it. The unease only grows. How did they even come up with that amount? Is it just enough to cover the monthly groceries? I wish Martin and Thomas had consulted me sooner, so I could have talked it over thoroughly with Dad. But considering Dad is a good guy, but a bit stubborn, maybe they thought they'd have to meet certain conditions if they consulted him in advance. Now, I suspect they've been scheming behind my back ever since they heard Dad was going overseas. It's disheartening to even think about it. I decide to consult with a trusted close friend. A few days later, I decided to reach out to my best friend Rosalie for advice. Rosalie and I have been close friends since middle school. We've shared all the highs and lows, and I knew I could trust her in this situation. That's why I took the leap and contacted her. Rosalie was quick to adjust her schedule when I told her I needed to talk, no questions asked. We met in a private dining room at a restaurant. Judging from the tone of my voice, Rosalie guessed it wasn't a light matter and suggested we talk somewhere private, so we wouldn't be overheard. It was like divine intervention. It had been a while since we'd caught up, so initially we chatted about inconsequential things. After settling in, Rosalie gave me the cue, saying, "So," I laid out the whole story, how Philip, who's going to college, was asking to move in with us. That he said it would be until he saves enough money, but didn't specify the amount or the time frame. Martin seemed open to the idea and passed the decision-making on to me. Our house is in Dad's name, and he, currently overseas, flat out refused to discuss it when I brought it up. If Philip moved in, we were considering a rent of $200. On top of all this, I have Mia at home, and I'm not comfortable bringing in a male relative who's essentially a stranger. I think that, because of the house is in Dad's name, we definitely need his approval. I'm also suspicious that they waited until Dad was out of the country to bring this up. I got so emotional while talking that I cried and wasn't even sure if I got all my points across. Still, Rosalie listened attentively to everything I said. She occasionally rubbed my back and softly encouraged me to continue sharing. After hearing me out, Rosalie offered her opinion and advice. First, I should definitely check with Dad beforehand. She scolded me for even considering informing Dad after the fact, especially since Martin and Thomas should be asking Dad very respectfully for this favor. If Philip can't go to college without doing something like this, then maybe he shouldn't go at all. A $200 rent is absurd. And what about the shared responsibilities like cooking and laundry and utilities? Who's going to handle all of that? It's not comfortable to let Philip use the kitchen freely, and Martin is usually out for work, which means Alice, who works from home, will bear all these burdens. And Martin is either knowingly or unknowingly ignoring that. As for me, I felt I could have told him to take care of things instead because I wasn't going to. That's what she told me. I felt understood by her words. Moreover, Rosalie added that she had been natural when listening to me. She wasn't siding with me. She said she was merely sharing a typical perspective. She also said that she supports my viewpoint and will offer help if needed. Feeling encouraged by my meeting with Rosalie, I decided to talk to Dad about it. The next day, I received a text from Martin saying it was up to me to decide, so I finally replied, "Then I have to say no." Martin shot back, "What's your reason for saying no? You just don't want to go to the trouble, do you?" "I won't accept that excuse," with a text that made no sense. It seemed like Rosalie was right. Martin had no real intention of taking care of things. he was just trying to push it onto me. I decided I would talk to Dad when I get a chance. Martin is probably worried about the conditions Dad might set. Even if Dad agreed, there would be stipulations like a curfew, helping around the house, maintaining good study habits, and so on. Since Dad practices karate, he might also require attending karate classes on weekends to instill discipline. If Philip can't meet even one of these conditions, Dad would probably have him go back to his home country immediately. However, if Philip really needs to this favor despite these conditions, I'm not heartless. I'll try to help him. The next day, I called Dad. As expected, he was uncomfortable with the idea of someone living in his home while he's not around, so he couldn't give permission. Instead, he said he knows a real estate agent and would try to arrange for them to handle it. After finishing my call with Dad, Martin came home with Thomas. Thomas happened to be in town on a business trip. I took the opportunity to tell them what Dad said. We can't allow Philip to live here, but a real estate agent could help find him a place. I told them directly. Both Martin and Thomas were furious. This changes things. We were planning to move things here soon, they said. Martin yelled, "Why do you even have to talk to Stephen about this?" And just as Mia tried to intervene, Martin raised a fist to hit her. I quickly stepped in and got kicked in the chest. I stumbled and bumped into Mia. In response to all of this, "I was only pretending to throw a punch. I never actually planned to hit anyone. Mia fell because you walked in. Don't get it twisted. If anyone's to blame, 90% is on you and only 10% is on me," Martin said. Why did everything change so suddenly? We used to live together so harmoniously. This is the first time something like this has happened, and I'm really shaken up. I work from home, so I'm still here, but Martin went back to his parents' house. As he was leaving, he snarled, "Don't go saying I've changed or that I'm abusive. You're the one who made me mad, so don't get it twisted." It sounds like a child's excuse, and it just brings me to tears. Fortunately, Mia only fell on her behind and wasn't seriously hurt. However, when I shielded Mia, I got kicked in the chest. It still hurt the next day, so I went to the hospital. Turned out, I had a broken rib. I also got a medical certificate just in case. Being alone at home makes me uneasy, so I briefly explained the situation and asked my aunt to come stay with me. I can't bear the thought of Mia getting hurt again, so I've taken some basic security measures, like installing a simple lock. Life has changed so drastically. It feels surreal. Martin says he'll commute to work from his parents' house for a while. He also says he won't come back unless I apologize and convince my dad to let Philip stay. To be honest, I feel like my feelings for Martin have cooled off. I think it would be manageable if Thomas would just let us live separately and ask for occasional help. I can't understand Martin's insistence on living together. Can a family really fall apart this easily? Is distant blood really prioritized over close family? I can't find answers, no matter how much I ponder. For now, the only thing to focus on is making sure Mia can live in a safe environment. Even if Martin were to return, I don't think my concerns would go away. At this point, I'm even considering divorce. My best friend Rosalie was right. It's unthinkable to let a stranger, even if they're family, live in a house that's in my dad's name. I plan to contact my dad again for advice. 2 months later, an update for you. After some heated arguments about letting my brother-in-law's college-going son move in with us, the divorce finally went through. After I filled Dad in on the details, he said he'd come back to the country. I talked to Mia, telling her we wouldn't live with Martin anymore because of the divorce. Mia looked sad, but she didn't say she didn't want to go. Perhaps memories of the violence held her back. Seeing her like this made my chest tighten. As I dealt with my rib pain and began searching for a lawyer, Rosalie, my best friend, once again came through. She introduced me to an attorney who specializes in divorce cases. She's like a guardian angel, always appearing when I'm in a bind. Since Martin returned to his family home, there has been radio silence. Even when I text him, there is no response. Once Dad was back in the country, he and Martin did talk over the phone. When I asked Dad about their conversation, he told me Martin had said, "The broken rib was 20% my fault and 80% Alice's. I'm more the victim here than anyone else." And when Dad tried to dig deeper, Martin just shut him down, saying, "I don't owe you any explanations." When I brought up the divorce, he was a bit flustered, but having already claimed he did no wrong, he was defiant, telling me to go ahead if I could. However, once the mediation began, Martin quickly toned down. We reached a settlement where he would pay compensation for the divorce and child support, and also pay damages for the abuse towards Mia and me. Later on, Thomas reached out to apologize. Along with that, new revelations about Martin, unknown to me, came to light. Originally, Martin had told Thomas that he would contribute $200 for Philip's living expenses. However, it turns out he was discussing with his in-laws about them giving him around $800. In other words, he was trying to sick him off the top. That's why he was so insistent on having us all live together. Martin loved golf and frequented the courses, which obviously cost money, but I thought he was spending within his personal budget. Apparently, he had a love for gambling since his college days, particularly horse racing. Neither while we were dating nor after we were married did he ever show signs of this. Needless to say, it was quite a shock. Moreover, he had been secretly accumulating debt, which may have been causing his desperation. It wasn't money borrowed from a mafia or anything, but the total amount was around $20,000, which stunned me. Upon hearing this, Thomas was understandably furious. "You may have taken advantage of our kindness, but you with such intentions are far worse. Plus, how are you not ashamed of resorting to violence?" he said. It appears Martin's change in behavior was likely due to his fear of his debts becoming public knowledge. When Thomas spoke to Martin, "We have an old house with plenty of rooms. You could stay here and commute if you chip in some for living expenses," he was told. Thomas naively trusted him and felt grateful. Even when he visited for business, he thought the deal was set and prepared to send his belongings. Upon discussing this again with his wife and acquaintances, we realized our behavior wasn't sensible. "We are deeply sorry," they apologized. Along with that, they extended a thick envelope. It was clearly apology money. However, forgiving Martin for this wasn't on my agenda. And even though I was unaware of these matters, I did harbor distrust towards Thomas. If you could prepare that much money, you should have given it to your son from the start to help him become self-sufficient. Then we wouldn't be in this mess. I politely declined. Thomas then offered his apologies once more and left, deflated. Several months later. After the divorce, Mia and I have been going to counseling twice a month. Since Dad returned overseas, we occasionally ask my uncle and his wife for support. Things were settling down when suddenly a letter arrived from Martin. Honestly, I didn't want to open it, but I saw it and decided to at least read it before throwing it away. Long time no see. How are you? I regret losing my temper last time. I was scared of what you'd think if you found out about my debt. But now, I think there might have been a solution if I'd been honest. How's Mia? Is she lonely without a father? I'm trying to change, to be a better husband and dad. I think you didn't really want to divorce me. You probably felt you had to, because of Steven. But don't you think it's time to stand on your own? I've cut back on golf and quit betting on horses. I'm making plans to pay off the debt. Why not consider living together again as a family? I know you both want it. I'll come to get you once the debt is settled. Take care. The letter was purely self-serving. This made me feel even more at risk, so I showed the letter to my uncle and his wife. They immediately contacted a lawyer to arrange a restraining order. The terms are, if Martin contacts us again, we'll demand $1,000 in emotional damages each time. If he continues, we'll report him to the police for stalking and send a formal document stating as much to Martin. I worried this might backfire, but my uncle and his wife said they'd handle it. My in-laws, perhaps feeling guilty, are also watching over Martin and cooperating. I had already asked the lawyer to seek Thomas's help, and it turns out that Martin is apparently mentally unstable now. He is still working, but sometimes mutters to himself, worrying even Thomas, who's made him start counseling. I wish he had sought help before things got to this point. Now, knowing he secretly took out loans and wouldn't hesitate to become violent, I'm relieved we got divorced. I just want a peaceful life now. Thankfully, I can work from home, so there are no financial concerns, and Mia is also settling emotionally and going to school. I hope for calm days ahead.
My name is Ashley. I'm 32, juggling a desk job at a small firm while managing the home front. Gilbert, my husband, and I met through mutual friends, and we've been married for 3 years now. The honeymoon phase is over. The fluttery feelings have settled. But day-to-day life is mostly stress-free and peaceful. Well, just the two of us. Ashley, this soup lacks flavor. Did you really simmer it with chicken bones and vegetables? I'm sorry. The entrance and the bathroom weren't cleaned properly. It really shows how you were raised. Are you listening? Yes. During the summer break, I was dragged to my in-laws, treated almost like a servant by Carolina, and constantly criticized. Every time we had a significant break, I was brought to the in-laws and burdened with chores, then bombarded with a slew of complaints about my shortcomings. Lucas and even Gilbert would just be engrossed in newspapers or their phones, acting oblivious to Carolina's attitude. Still, on our drive back, Gilbert would try to console me. I'm sorry, Mom's always been a bit much, but I think she's really happy when you're around. She seems more lively. But he's kind of missing the point. Maybe Carolina is spirited because she has someone to pick on. However, many of my friends also have mother-in-law issues, so I thought this was just how things were. If I stayed patient, things would settle. Around that time, Gilbert's brother Robert got married. Robert is a quiet guy, especially compared to Gilbert. Even when I saw him at family gatherings, we had barely exchanged greetings. And Robert's new wife? A youthful, modern beauty named Sarah, nearly 12 years his junior. It felt like an unlikely pairing. Carolina was over the moon, exclaiming, "Typical Robert, snatching up a young wife." This year would be the first Christmas with Robert and Sarah. They said they're working until Christmas, so they plan to come then. Given this, I stayed with the in-laws from Christmas Eve, which meant an even more charged-up Carolina giving me tasks. "Ashley, are you still cleaning? At this rate, it'll be Christmas before you're done. Hurry up and prep the gratin." "Okay. Oh, I can't wait for tomorrow. She's my son's young wife. I'll have to show her the ropes." I secretly sighed, watching an overly enthusiastic Carolina out of the corner of my eye. Tomorrow, I'll try to help Sarah as much as I can. While feeling more sympathy than happiness about being in the same boat as sons' wives, I wrung out the cloth in cold bucket water. Around noon the next day, Robert and his wife arrived. Sarah might seem flashy, but she was courteous in her greetings and actions, which made me like her. Yet, Carolina seemed preoccupied, looking for something to nag Sarah about. First impressions matter, after all. "Come on, Ashley, serve the coffee quickly and prep for the Christmas feast." "Okay." "And you too, Sarah." "Oh." Sarah, about to head to the living room with Robert, looked startled. "A son's wife belongs in the kitchen, right?" "Hey, Mom." "Just sit down, Robert. Leave your bags at the entrance." With a sharp glare, Carolina dragged Sarah into the kitchen. She instructed me to teach her properly and then returned to the living room, seemingly satisfied. I reached out to the stunned Sarah. It's tough right after arriving, but here, the son's wife has to get the hospitality going immediately. The coffee pot's over there and the cups are here. Sarah, looking even more baffled, asked, "How do you know where everything is in someone else's kitchen?" "Well, since I've been doing all the chores here every time I visit, I've got the hang of it." "Really?" "The son's wife only starts eating after everyone's done. Until then, just focus on serving. Best of luck." "What?" Overwhelmed by these house rules, Sarah let out a loud exclamation. My ears rang from the sudden noise, and even Carolina, who was relaxing in the living room, came rushing in. "What's all the commotion?" "Oh, Carolina, so the harassment begins right after I arrive, huh?" "What?" An agitated Sarah confronted Carolina, who looked taken aback. "This is a fun way to harass me, right? Making the son's wife do all the work and not even letting her eat. Wow, it's like an old drama. There's actually a Carolina that exists to bully the son's wife. We should preserve this endangered species." Wait a minute. Carolina, is harassing the son's wife a tradition in this house? Are you jealous because we took your lovely sons? "That's not harassment. It's education." Carolina's face contorted. "Education, you say? Ashley, what do you think?" Caught off guard by the sudden request, I hesitated, as Sarah, who seemed like a detective from some drama, paced the kitchen tapping her temple. She quipped, "Is this education endorsed by the Department of Education? Do they teach in schools that a son's wife should eat last? I haven't heard of that." Me neither." After I responded vaguely, Sarah smirked and addressed Carolina. Carolina, do you fancy yourself a noble lady for wanting to pass down this son's wife harassment tradition? Huh? Carolina seemed utterly baffled. Maybe we should check with the neighbors if this is really a local tradition. I'll go ask them right now. No. Once you're done with the Christmas meal prep, both of you can sit down. Carolina was clearly overwhelmed with Sarah's fierce logic. Yes, all right. Ashley, let's wrap this up so we can eat together. Okay. Sarah, turning off her detective mode, grinned cheerfully, while Carolina glared at her intently. Being outmaneuvered by Sarah's strange logic felt unexpectedly liberating to me. Sarah's assertiveness made it feel like she genuinely might question the neighbors. However, this was just the beginning of Sarah versus Carolina. I knew Carolina wouldn't stop until she turned the tables. When Sarah and I joined the table, Gilbert and Lucas seemed taken aback. Still, true to form, neither of them said a word. Robert, looking relieved, seated Sarah beside him. Carolina, recovering from the previous blow, scanned for any flaw in her son's wives. Yet, Sarah remained unfazed. Delicious! Did you make this, Ashley? Yes. I love green bean casserole and stuffing. I could eat them all year round. Her youthful charm was somewhat healing. When was the last time I laughed in this house? Then, Sarah tilted her head as she tried to sprinkle some salt on her plate. Oh, we're out of salt. I'll go get it from the kitchen. Thanks, Robert. As Robert acted naturally, Sarah smiled appreciatively. Carolina, however, saw her opportunity. Don't use Robert like that. It really shows your upbringing. What? It's his home. It's only natural he helps out. It's strange and old-fashioned to make your wife do everything. Old-fashioned? Being called old-fashioned again, Carolina clamped up. The atmosphere, so different from when it was, just Carolina and me, left even the typically aloof Lucas and Gilbert slack-jawed. Only Robert and Sarah seemed to be enjoying the Christmas feast and carpaccio. Watching them, a different thought began to form in my head. After the stormy lunch cleanup, I relaxed in the guest room prepared for us. Then, with me alone, Carolina entered with a sour expression. I knew this was coming. By the way, Ashley, how are things going with having a child? This was her usual line. Yet, she probably targeted me to avoid confronting Sarah. Seeing this, I felt less irritated than usual. Not yet. When will you? Have you been to a hospital? Yes, the doctor said I'm fine. So what? Gilbert has a problem. That's not necessarily... Usually I'd clam up here, but today was different. We're thinking of getting Gilbert tested as well. Ashley finally let out the words she'd been holding back. Submissive Ashley's sudden pushback made Carolina freeze. Then, what on earth? Carolina's face turned into a picture of pure rage. You naive girl. Ashley, there's no way Gilbert has an issue, right? Listen, if you don't have any issues, you should easily be able to have a child. Seriously, to blame your own failures on Gilbert, that's just pathetic. Excuse me? People have always said, if you don't get pregnant within 3 years of marriage, divorce. A woman who can't bear children isn't valuable. Surprise! Sarah suddenly popped up from behind Carolina. Oh! Carolina screamed in shock. Of course, I was also startled, but I was relieved that Sarah was there. Though Sarah may seem playful, She's always defended me. I understand what she's trying to convey, even if the bizarre norms of my in-laws had numbed me. What she's been continuously telling me is, just because I'm his wife, I don't need to obey the rules of my husband's family, especially when they're not even common sense rules. If something feels off, it's okay to speak up about it. I want to reciprocate Sarah's feelings. More than anything, I want to be freed from this prison-like in-laws' house. Wow, can you believe someone actually thinks like this in real life? Right, Ashley? Mimicking a commentator, Sarah pointed an imaginary microphone at me. Yeah, I'm surprised. People still think like this? Absolutely classic Carolina. A living relic. A national treasure. Presidential Medal of Freedom. Though my heart raced, I played along with Sarah's game. Sarah smirked, realizing my change of attitude. Carolina is the perfect example of an annoying mother-in-law. Bravo! #1 harasser of daughter-in-law in the country. Enough, enough, enough! Having been labeled old-fashioned and having her harassment thwarted, Carolina finally exploded. Hearing her, Robert and Gilbert rushed in. Robert, what's with this unreasonable woman? Ignoring Carolina's complaints, Robert firmly stood by Sarah. The one without common sense is you, Mom. Belittling and bossing around someone else's daughter is just low. I've suffered too. Now it's my turn. Myra died when I was young. How many years did you suffer? The nasty attitude and outdated views are not because of Myra, but what you created. How dare you, Robert? Is this all because of Sarah's influence? You should break up with her and leave right now. No, I've always found your hysterics and narcissism off-putting. I didn't even want to marry because I knew you'd bully my wife. But Sarah said, I'm fine with that. If anyone's leaving, it's not Sarah, it's you. The usually reserved Robert was going all out defending his wife. Seeing him do that made me tear up. Carolina, not expecting Robert to defy her, was at a loss for words. Oh. As you wish. Sarah and I are leaving. We won't ever come back to this harassment wonderland for wives. Why? Why are you leaving too, Robert? Stay here. You're my son, right? Not anymore. Goodbye, Mom. Robert! No! Grabbing the luggage they had when they arrived, Robert and his wife head for the entrance. Then, Sarah turned back and offered her hand to me. Ashley, want to come with us? With a bright smile, Sarah held out her hand, and I silently nodded. Thank you. I will. Oh, wait. Ashley? Gilbert, who had been largely silent, started panicking, but I didn't care. I took only my essentials and bolted out of the house with Robert and his wife. Robert and his wife were kind enough to let me ride their car. Ashley, I'm sorry for being so intense. It must have been a turn-off. Sarah, sitting beside me in the back seat, apologized. Not at all. Thanks to you both, I feel refreshed and woke up to reality. That's good. Sarah smiled reassuringly at me, trying to break the ice. All the fiery energy from earlier was gone, and she seemed incredibly calm. This was probably her true self. Sarah had fought with all her might. I'm sorry we couldn't help you sooner. We've always been concerned about how Gilbert and his family treated you. From the driver's seat, Robert also apologized, glancing at me through the rear view mirror. No, it's not your fault, Robert. I quickly denied it. I think both Gilbert and Dad and we've all had issues with Mom's character for a long time. Maybe that's why we've become so adept at avoiding conflict. Once she shifted her focus to you, It probably became easier for Gilbert. Nah, not that that's an excuse. Robert looked truly displeased. Sarah continued. That's why Robert never wanted to get married. But I did, so we staged this act to get banned from Carolina's. Of course, if she treated us well, we wouldn't have done a thing. Robert, Sarah. The two genuinely care for one another. This is what true love looks like. I felt clarity like a fog lifting in my mind. Thanks to you both, I've realized who the real enemy is. Ashley. Robert smiled, a look of relief yet a hint of sadness on his face. I'll give you the recordings later. Robert has been secretly recording all the previous harassments as well. I kept them, thinking you might need them someday, though I wished you never would. Sarah, Robert, we'll never go back to that toxic house again, but if you're ever in trouble, just call. I'll always stand by you, Ashley. Sarah made a fist, signaling her support. Their presence bolstered my resolve. Robert and Sarah dropped me off at home. As I tidied up my room, I awaited Gilbert's return. But Gilbert didn't come home until midday the next day. On seeing that I was home, he looked relieved. I'm back. Yesterday was rough after that. Mom was livid. I noticed. I vouched for you. Told them you were just overwhelmed by Sarah's energy and that you'll apologize next time. He blabbered on, oblivious to my cold demeanor. That wife of Robert's Sarah, right? Man, Robert really chose a crazy one. Is she insane? I'm glad I chose you, Ashley. Age doesn't matter in a wife, huh? Choosing Gilbert was a big mistake on my part. Huh? For a moment, he seemed to not grasp what I said. When he turned to look at me, his eyes widened in surprise. Seeing my deadpan expression, realization dawned on him. I had hoped after witnessing Robert's actions that Gilbert might change, but in the end, you're just like Carolina. What a shame. Why are you acting like this? Everything was fine until now. Because I've been the only one compromising. You've used me as a shield. No more. Like a sacrificial lamb. To escape Carolina's wrath. You've perfectly inherited the role your father, Lucas, played all these years. Sacrificial? That wasn't my intention. Despite the unheated room, Gilbert began sweating profusely. He was clearly rattled, trying to grasp at any semblance of control. If you truly cared about me, I began, you wouldn't have dragged me to such a painful place. And even if you did, you'd shield me from the hurt. Look, He stammered. I've realized who the real enemy is. It's you, Gilbert. Seeing Robert's genuine concern, it became clear. Thanks to Robert and Sarah, I finally understand. Ashley. Let's end this. Carolina always said a woman who can't bear children should leave. This works out. I've downloaded divorce papers online. Here you go. Goodbye. I grabbed my packed bags, slipped on my shoes, and remarked, Since you weren't home, I shipped out the bulky stuff already. Wait, Ashley! I didn't even bother to look back at his pitiful, desperate voice. Without any hesitation or regret, I left the home I'd grown accustomed to. Shortly after Christmas, I consulted with a lawyer. I entrusted everything to him, not wanting to ever return to that house. My ex-in-laws, with their overbearing nature, and Gilbert, were quite intimidated by my attorney. Thanks to the evidence that Robert and Sarah provided, the divorce proceedings went relatively smooth. Carolina was heard grumbling after finding Gilbert a new wife who's better and can bear lots of children. My son's wife is probably just a tool for his family. my lawyer quipped with a wry smile. Fast forward 5 years. Melissa, dinner's ready. Use your spoon, okay?
Uh-huh.
Your friend Alice is such a sweet and wonderful girl. Melissa is irresistibly adorable. Watching kids playing pretend at a local community center, Sarah and I basked in the tranquility of the moment. 3 years after my divorce, I remarried. Soon, our daughter Melissa, who's about to turn 1, was born. It proved that I wasn't a woman who couldn't have children. My current husband and his family are wonderful people, or rather just normal folks with common sense. They adore not only their granddaughter, but also me, their son's wife. During Gilbert's divorce fiasco, Sarah and her family helped me just as they promised they would. Our friendship continued even after the divorce. Now, it feels like we're comrades in arms, or friends, or even like sisters. Sarah also has a 3-year-old daughter, Alice, who plays well and is kind to Melissa. Although Alice is Gilbert's child with another woman, meaning there's no blood relation, the two kids seem like real cousins. Meanwhile, Gilbert did remarry, but apparently divorced again shortly after. Neither Carolina nor Gilbert seem to recognize their flaws or change their ways. In a short span, after both of their sons' wives left them and Robert's family distanced themselves, whispers labeled their home as the dwelling of the harsh mother-in-law. It seemed women began to keep their distance. In desperation, Gilbert tried to reconcile with me, and Carolina made ridiculous demands to Robert's family, like, bring the grandchild and come live with us. They were promptly rebuffed. Of course, there's no way we'd return to that dwelling of the harsh mother-in-law. Those who can't admit their mistakes will likely wither away in loneliness there. Ashley, once Melissa starts walking, do you want to go to the park? There's a spot with really soft grass. It feels so good, Sarah suggested. That sounds great. I'm looking forward to it, I replied. We exchanged smiles. I do owe Gilbert one thing, introducing me to Sarah. If I had remained Gilbert's sacrificial lamb, I wouldn't have found this calm and gentle time. Remembering the warmth of the hand Sarah extended to me back then, I feel deeply grateful that I ventured into a new world.
I am Lisa. I'm about to turn 46. I have been married to Michael for over 30 years, and our kids are getting pretty grown up. I have a sister named Nicole, and I'm quite close with her husband David, who is like a real brother to me. David and Nicole have 3 kids. 2 are adults and 1 is still in middle school, living with my parents and Nicole. I have interacted with their kids a few times, and they seem like good kids, probably take after David. Why do I say that? Well, without airing dirty laundry, my parents and Nicole are not the most pleasant people. My dad passed away when I was in my 20s due to illness, so it's just my mom now. She was never keen on parenting, pretty hands-off, so my paternal grandparents often stepped in to help. Nicole inherited that hands-off approach to parenting, and David picked up the slack. Nicole and Mom also had a tendency to be reckless spenders, and David had to work multiple jobs at times. I couldn't understand why David stayed married to Nicole, who even looked down on him at times. But my perspective changed significantly once I got married and had my own kids. Both Michael and I offered our help to David. Next thing you know, years have passed and David is now 55. When I was around 45, an unexpected incident occurred. David fell ill. I was doing chores at home when my phone rang. It was Nicole. Sounding a bit flustered, she told me that David had collapsed. She didn't know all the details but asked if I could come to the hospital immediately. I dropped everything and rushed to the hospital Nicole directed me to. When I got there, Nicole, her kids, and Mom were already in a room, their hands clasped together, looking anxious. Seeing them like that, I felt relieved in an inappropriate way, realizing that Nicole must love David after all. I don't know how much time passed, but we all sat there in silence, just waiting. Finally, the door slowly opened, and 2 doctors walked in with serious faces. We all looked up at once, fixing our gaze on the doctors. The doctors took a seat and explained David's condition without avoiding eye contact. According to them, the surgery was successful, but his chronic illness had worsened severely and his blood wasn't circulating well. They also mentioned he had developed nephropathy due to complications from diabetes, which was inhibiting his recovery. I had never hated the fact that David had chronic illness until now.
"We'll keep an eye on him in the ICU for now, but his survival is uncertain,"
they said. Disheartened, we all went home.
"Did you even know David was in such bad shape?"
Michael and I sat down at the dining table after arriving home, both of us feeling the weight of the air in the room. Michael broke the silence, asking me seriously. I thought back but couldn't remember hearing any news like that. No, I knew he had a chronic illness but didn't think it was this serious. Will he be okay?
"Don't worry, let's just wait for now."
We spent a restless night unable to sleep. 3 days later, David never woke up and his condition worsened until he passed away. Supported by Michael, I broke down in tears. The loss hit hard. He was like a real brother to me. David and Nicole still have their 13-year-old daughter, Emily. Can Nicole and Mom raise Emily on their own from now on? Seeing Emily stand still white looking at David, who lay peacefully in the ICU, made me feel uneasy. But there was no time to dwell on that. Preparations for David's funeral began immediately. Nicole and Mom talked with the funeral home and the arrangements were made. Modestly, without spending too much, although it was supposed to be a private viewing, many people showed up to pay their respects due to David's past deeds, bringing flowers at the very least. With the busy viewing behind us, the family-only farewell ceremony and cremation were scheduled for the next day. As the farewell ceremony concluded and only the cremation remained, I noticed something when we were adding flowers to David's casket. Inside the casket, there were several pictures of Nicole and David, likely placed there by Nicole. "Nicole, look at this." I pointed to the photos while Nicole touched David's cheeks, tears streaming down her face. Upon seeing them, Nicole softly uttered, David asked me to do this before he passed. He wanted me to put pictures of us together in his casket. He had even selected a few neatly placed in an envelope." I felt a bit annoyed at Nicole's somewhat proud expression, but I understood since it was David's wish. Just as I was about to move on without touching the photos, I caught a glimpse of a picture that was turned upside down. I picked it up and looked at it carefully. "Wow, what's this?" There were odd symbols written on the back of the photo. They didn't seem to form a date or anything recognizable. The mysterious arrangement made me uneasy. I have no idea either. What could it be? As I looked puzzled, Nicole expressed her own confusion. Ignoring Nicole's words, I pondered deeply about what these symbols could mean. While looking at David's peaceful, sleeping face, a past memory suddenly returns to me.
"I used to exchange coded messages with friends when I was a kid."
That was when I was still a teenager and David had just married Nicole. David had cheerfully told me this during a game of solving ciphers. I focused to recall the story David told me. Then it hits me what he had been talking about. It was about using symbols for cipher games, just like what's on the back of his photo. Apparently, it was Morse code using long signal dashes and short signals dots to represent alphabets, numbers, and punctuations. I immediately attempt to decode what David must have written following the cipher game, and what I find is shocking.
"I am being targeted for life insurance money by my wife and mother-in-law, Rebecca. I can't save myself, but I want to protect my child. Emily is being abused under the guise of discipline from my wife. Please protect her. I hope Lisa finds this.
It seems the message was divided between the backs of 4 photos to go unnoticed. I look up at Nicole. She likely has no idea what David was thinking as she's unaware of the coded message. Just imagining what Nicole, who lovingly gazes at David, and Mom, who stands beside her, might have done, sends chills down my spine. What's going on? Nicole notices me looking at her. Our eyes meet. In that moment, my fear intensifies. I shake off Nicole's outstretched hand and shout, "Stop it!" The atmosphere turns tense. Both Nicole and Mom are staring at me in disbelief.
What happened?
Michael notices my distress and comes over, but I'm in no state to entertain his concern. I glare at Nicole.
I will never forgive you,
I say and rush out of the funeral home and the commotion. I look at the photos again from a distance, my hatred for Nicole and Mom intensifying.
Lisa, what's going on?
Worried about my sudden departure, Michael immediately came running after me. I wiped away the tears that were about to fall and showed the picture to Michael, who was catching his breath. Of course, Michael doesn't understand what it means. His eyes lingered on the front side before freezing upon flipping it over.
What are these symbols?
He asked, his face grim, looking at the hastily scribbled numbers. David and I used to play these cipher games when we were teenagers. The letter uses symbols from those games. I explained. I told Michael everything. That David might have been killed by Nicole and Mom, and that my niece, Emily, might be badly influenced. Michael listened in stunned silence. After a moment's thought, he finally spoke.
Going to the police won't do any good.
He was right. David's death was technically from illness, and Nicole and Mom didn't directly do anything. Given there's no actual evidence about Emily, the police probably can't do anything. I have heard the term civil matter often enough to easily guess that the police wouldn't be able to take action in a situation like this.
Why don't we go check things out?
As I was feeling powerless about not being able to do anything, Michael quietly suggested,
let's visit Lisa's parents' house on a day Emily is there and see how things are.
Seeing my confusion, Michael clarified with a serious look. Indeed, I recalled that I haven't had any interaction with Emily for several years now. I nodded at Michael's suggestion and decided to visit my family home at a later date. Following Michael's lead, I attended the cremation ceremony again that day and apologized to Nicole, saying, "Sorry for acting strange." Nicole clearly wasn't convinced, and Mom looked at me as if she thought I had gone mad. But I acted as normal as possible to avoid suspicion. After a few days passed, I was able to visit my family home with Michael on a day off. Since I had notified Mom in advance, she and Nicole greeted us with smiles. Perhaps because Michael was with me? "It's been a while since you came home." We obediently followed as we were led to the living room and took seats on the sofa. Nicole looked cheerful even though David had passed away only a few days ago. She seemed well. "Sorry for dropping by suddenly." When I said that, both Mom and Nicole cheerfully replied, "Your family, you are always welcome to come home." But I know these are their public faces. If I had come back alone, they would probably be sulking and say nothing. "Where's Emily?" Sipping the coffee Mom made, I looked around the room. "Emily, maybe she's studying in her room." "Can I go see Emily?" As I stand up, Nicole and Mom look like they want to say something but don't, perhaps due to Michael's presence. They force a smile and say, "Sure." I head out of the living room and go toward what I assume is Emily's room. Michael had promised to keep Nicole and Mom away for a bit, so I know I'll have some time alone to talk with Emily. I pause in front of Emily's room, take a deep breath to steady myself, and knock. I heard a faint voice in response, so I opened the door. The room felt bare, especially for a teenage girl. It had only a bed, a study desk, and a bookshelf. The bookshelf was filled with textbooks and workbooks, no comics or novels in sight, but I didn't bring that up, instead walking over to Emily, who looks at me nervously. "It's been a while since David's funeral, huh? We didn't get to talk much then. What are you up to? Emily is facing her desk with a textbook and a notebook open in front of her. But the notebook is blank. She looks down, not answering my question. Studying? She nods silently. Not making much progress. How about taking a break? I try to speak gently to Emily, who seems distressed, but her expression doesn't change. I would get yelled at by Mom. I see. Want to chat with me for a bit? When I offer a smile, Emily reluctantly turns her body to face me. I consider how to ask Emily about Nicole and the others. Are you doing okay without David? That's a good place to start. Emily keeps looking down and shakes her head. As long as you're fine, that's what matters. I have been worried. Worried? Yeah, David used to talk about you, and since he's suddenly gone, I have been concerned. Is Nicole giving you a hard time? I decide to be upfront as I suspect Emily might not open up otherwise. At my words, Emily looks surprised, but quickly lowers her eyes again. What did you hear? Emily asked me quietly, but I hadn't gotten the full story from David about what Emily was up to, so I couldn't answer right away. Just then, whether Michael had lost his grip or not, Nicole burst into the room energetically. The sound is loud and Emily's expression changes to one of fear upon seeing Nicole. How long are you gonna chat? It appears Nicole came alone. Her eyes narrow and she glares at me. We haven't caught up in a while. What's the big deal? I don't know what you have to talk about, but if you want to, come downstairs. With that, Nicole enters the room, grabs Emily's arms, and pulls her up. At that moment, I heard Emily say, "Ouch!" I tried to grab Emily's shoulder to stop Nicole from heading downstairs, but as soon as I touched her, Emily shouted, "Ouch!" in a loud voice. I let go of her shoulder and looked at Emily, her face contorted in pain. I didn't think I had grabbed her that hard. Could it really hurt that much? Trying again, I realized just how thin Emily's body was. I had always thought she was skinny, but this was extreme. I'm sorry, Emily, are you okay? I rushed over to Emily, who was crouching down, holding her shoulder, and peered into her face. That's when I noticed black marks on Emily's body, visible through the gaps in her clothing. I could lift Emily's shirt right there and then, but doing that wouldn't help with confronting Nicole. I'm sorry, Nicole. Seeing Emily just reminded me of the old days. You know, my own kids are grown up and we rarely see each other, so it was nostalgic. Pretending not to notice anything, I smiled at Nicole. How about this, Nicole? Can we invite Emily over to our place? I would love to catch up with her too. Right, Emily? Come over. It's been a while. Both Nicole and Emily looked surprised at my sudden suggestion. But Nicole gave me a sharp look and didn't agree. What are you talking about? Absolutely not. Yeah, figures. I knew Nicole would say that, but it was worth a try. I pondered what to do next. I desperately wanted to separate Emily and Nicole from this situation.
Oh, what's going on?
Just then, Michael seemed to catch on and pokes his head out from behind Nicole. Upon Michael's sudden appearance, Nicole was momentarily surprised but quickly put on a public face. I watched Nicole and thought, she's quite the actress. I was just negotiating with Nicole. I ran into Emily after a long time and wanted to invite her to our house.
Why not? Come over. It's been a while, right, Nicole?
Michael seemed to understand and smile at Nicole. Thanks to him, Nicole couldn't say no and gave a reluctant nod. Michael and I immediately had Emily grab some clothes and we left her parents' home. In the car, Emily was mostly silent. Even when I tried to make conversations, her response were mostly just, uh-huh. When we got home, I offered Emily some sweet tea and snacks and continued with light-hearted conversation. As time passed, I saw Emily's expression soften and sensed she was beginning to open up. Emily, about when I grabbed your shoulder earlier? Feeling we could now discuss it, I ventured into the sensitive topic. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to, but I saw some bruises on your body. Upon hearing this, Emily tensed up and looked down. I wondered if I had made a mistake by bringing it up, but then Emily slowly began to talk. Apparently, whenever Nicole didn't like something, she would physically lash out at Emily. There were even times when Emily wasn't given any food. Emily says, It's all my fault. But I can understand why anyone would raise a hand to her to the point where it leaves bruises. Not feeding her is simply outrageous. That must have hurt. May I take a look at your shoulder? Since Michael is around, I decide not to ask to see her entire body and instead settle for the shoulder area visible under her clothing. After hesitating for a moment, Emily slowly lowers her clothing to reveal her shoulder. Both Michael and I are speechless at the severity of the bruise. It's not just a little bump or slap, it's something far worse. The bruise covers her entire shoulder with the darkest spots indicating where she was hit the hardest. This is awful. As soon as I say this, Emily covers her shoulder and continues talking. Until now, David had been Emily's shield protecting her. Nicole never directly attacked her. But with David gone, there is no one to protect her and the abuse is directed solely at Emily. She thought about asking her adult brothers for help but couldn't bring herself to do it, considering they might also be victims. Tears quietly rolled down Emily's cheeks, her shoulders trembling. Here, while I sit beside her, gently rubbing her back, Emily takes out her mobile phone from her bag and hands it to me. My dad told me to give this to you, Lisa, in case something happens to him. With that, Emily tapped on her smartphone and then showed me the screen again. It displayed what looked like a saved audio file. Michael and I exchanged glances before hitting the play button. What? The recorded conversation between Nicole and Mom reveals a shocking plot. They're planning to live easy lives by claiming David's insurance money to pay off debts, and to do so they need to make his death appear natural. This involves withholding medication, preventing hospital visits, and serving high-calorie and high-salt foods to worsen his condition. Both Michael and I are speechless, our faces ashen. After we listen to the recording, Emily continues. Dad had been feeling dizzy and had headaches. He couldn't go to the hospital and was getting worse day by day. I wanted to help him, but I was too scared to do anything. I hold Emily tightly as she cries and sobs. Apparently, it was David who instructed her to record the conversation. I copy the audio file from Emily's phone to mine. I tell her to get some rest, and Michael and I decide to go to the police and consult Child Protective Services about Emily. The next day, although I initially planned to send Emily home, a gut feeling stops me and we head to the police station together. We explain everything and Emily corroborates our story. The police decide that Emily will stay with us for a while and Nicole and Mom are arrested that day. They vehemently deny the charges, but the evidence including Emily's recording and my photos is compelling. They don't get to leave the police station and a trial is scheduled. Emily agreed to stand as a witness too. Though I hesitated, not wanting to put her through something so traumatic, she consented after some convincing. After all, it was for her sake as well. Based on various evidence, Nicole and Mom were sentenced to prison time. Emily was initially taken away by Child Protective Services, but her brothers decided to take care of her and were able to bring her back. We vowed to support them, so as not to burden David's children. Since then, we have increased our contact and visits with David's kids, and notice they have brightened up compared to before. It's hard to believe that family members could commit such serious crimes, but what Nicole and Mom did wasn't as shocking as a regret that lingered for not urging David to divorce sooner. However, we can't stay shocked forever, especially if we want to preserve Emily's smile. We have decided to move forward hand in hand with David's children.